that we have won. Activism is generally ignored. Once there is a strong opposition, it is a sign of growth. The activist community has grown on its campus in a way, this is so surreal, in a way that has taken us to a place where we have a strong opposition, and that means that activism is growing. We can easily be discouraged by this opposition and write it off as, interesting, as humanity being hopeless, apathetic and complacent in the name of easy macaroni and cheese. I have felt my feelings being hurt when I hear people talking against referendums so fervently. But then I forget that I'm not alone, that I am surrounded by caring, supportive people who value their relationships, who have made a connection, that their relationships matter in their own personal lives, and that their relationships matter in a communal sense, even a global sense. I have a relationship with the person whose food I have made, and a relationship with the person who made my sneakers. And this valuing of relationships, out of this comes a great wealth of activism. Hopefully these students and people that we judge, that I judge, apathetic, value their own relationships with themselves and others, and if they don't, that they will soon. And that once they do, maybe they already have, that they make the connection between the people in their own lives and how important a role they play in their lives, the people around the world and how important a role they play in their lives. That last sentence could have been edited a little bit. Okay. So that night, people did gather in Mod 19, just aside, and we were together, and my roommates were okay with it. Mod 19 was a center for like cultural activity, like and stuff, and we did speeches and we sang songs and we did all that stuff, and then the very iMac that this was written on, the very iMac that is currently, that was the first of its kind in 1998, the first iMac, is sitting in my apartment somewhere, and I think still works. And that I intentionally kept every SJS email that was ever written, thinking maybe one day someone would want to see these. So apparently, like for the practicum, I would like someone to come to my house and I'll just give them my iMac. I mean, not give it to them, but like lend it to them. And that iMac was the iMac that Adam Herman checked when the time came to check. And the suspense was killing us all. It was like 2004, November. Figuring out who was going to win, Bush or Kerry. And boy, was that a great night. And similarly, we lost, meaning that I wasn't for Bush. But somebody here may be. And so the point is that we lost by like, it was either 12 or 21 votes.
Yeah, we can't decide if it was 12 or 21.
21 was like 11 people would have just had to change theirs.
Oh,
yeah,
so
that's
12
exactly
more.
Yeah,
Thank
you.
that too.
And so
Good archival history.
the feeling in the room, the palpable sense of sorrow was immense and horrifying. It felt like we were on the cusp of history. You know, I was TAing a class. There was tears. I mean, Ben Brenzel was crying in my arms, saying that he was a coward. And 3 years later, or 2 years later, I would be crying in his arms in Central Park after Bush won, and having a very similar night. You know, I had puked right after Bush won, and I think I already cried for Katrina after Bush won. Like I sort of processed that sort of systematic thing on an emotional level, and then when Katrina happened, I was so hardened that I didn't even read anything about it. I was so upset and just like, I had already mourned this already. I already cried for all the people that were going to die because Bush won. Well, no, it is brought back because I could talk more about that night and what happened that night. We sang freedom songs and we were there for each other. But this informed my experience in the 2004 election. I was in a comedy group, the Late Night Players, which was created at Brandeis, and the center of which was Mod 19. And I was obsessed with this idea of what will happen after the election is over in 2004, in November. Either activism is going to have this huge victory, or it's going to have this huge defeat. At that point, Ben was like this prominent person who was like working for Move On in a pretty prominent way. And I was in a comedy group, and I felt kind of like, once again, like an inferior activist, and I wasn't doing enough for the world, and felt so lost in my universe. And I wanted to start an organization called WhereDoWeGo.org that was named after Martin Luther King's last book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, which David introduced me to. And yeah, Martin Luther King wrote books, which I didn't even know. I just thought he gave these amazing speeches, and but he also wrote these books and did other things too. But the point is that I was thinking ahead of time, what do we do if we lose? what will happen to the morale of the progressive movement? So I thought I could start this organization, and I told Ben, like, I'm touring all the time, so Paul can start. And Ben was like, no, Paul's not going to start. Paul Adler, who's been interviewed,
Rocks.
I believe. And Ben said, no, don't depend on Paul. And this is like my network, right? It's coming out of Brandeis, out of this community. He said, depend on yourself. Come down to DC. You'll sleep on my couch, or you'll sleep on Paul's. I slept on both. Leave the late night players for a while. I did. And start your organization. I did. And that was starting to interview luminaries in the progressive movement. And I could not believe how easy it was, just like we couldn't believe how easy it was in the bus class. Just walking around with a tape recorder, leaders in the progressive movement were totally willing to talk to me. My first day there, I went to a Greenpeace rally, or Energy Action Coalition rally, and the head of Greenpeace was there. And he did an interview with me immediately, and then let me and Paul Adler interview him for like 2 hours, and then we're still in touch. It was a crazy thing. And it was my first time, like, really, I was like a renegade activist with like tape recorder, I have no money, had no idea what the hell I was doing with my life. My grandparents were like, you have these loans, and we're the co-signers. And I'm like, no, like, our world is on fire, and I'm trying to do something about it. And they're like, screw the world. Look, one mitzvah can change the world, two will just make you tired. Okay, I heard that once. Anyway, the experience of the community was informing what I was thinking about for the 2004 election, and the idea that what would happen to the progressive movement afterward. So I was interviewing these leaders as to what their vision was going forward. I wanted to see something aspirational. And I think on some level I was correct, that what we needed was aspirational, and we saw that in 2008 with President Obama's election. It was an aspirational victory. There's a lot more to say around this, but it was a painful thing. Leaving Brandeis was painful. Being a senior, are there seniors in here? My friend Seth D. Michaels, who had graduated the year before me, but he was always coming to campus because he was still he was in the late night players, and he would come here for rehearsals. He said it's sort of like dying. And it really felt like dying. It did. I began valuing things. Like, I would look at, like, the way colors are shaped, and I felt so grateful for life. Like, I just loved everything. It really did feel like I was leaving. But Seth D's take was, oh, it's like, you know, you have this whole life at Brandeis, and then, like, you get stuck in Florida, which is like the mods, and then you're just sort of like, let me just sit here and die. But there's a rebirthing process. But it takes a while, and it's annoying and painful. One of the best pieces of advice I was given was from Elaine Wong, who's like one of the best people at Brandeis. If you've gone to a Brandeis event, and you've seen her because she's at every single one, she had said, like, don't judge your whole life by your first year out of Brandeis. I felt so lost those first couple of years, and I just kept trying project after project. WhereDoWeGo.org was only one of them, and finally I had the craziest idea to, like, I was like, Ben, I've got it, Harry Potter fans, and he was like, oh God, you're obsessed with those books, and I was like, yeah, and we can change the world. And that happened to be the one that stuck, but there was a lot that I tried before then. So I'll stop there, but it was about my legacy to me, and that we had lost in my legacy at Brandeis. And it turns out, talking to Nicole and Evan today, I realized that we won. We won big because they were, in some ways, our legacy of the class that I was in Mod 19. And Evan, I will end my official formal presentation. Thank you.